A very good evening, dear parents. The thing about parenting rules is there aren't any. That's what makes it so difficult and sometimes so confusing. On behalf of our principal, Mrs. Manila Carvalho, I, Preeti Suta, extend a very warm welcome to each one of you for today's session on positive parenting. As parents, we feel we are constantly traversing an ever changing landscape of parenting issues. And at each and every stage of growth and development, we as parents need to tweak our approach to not only mold our children, but also evolve as the needs of parenting change. We all want to be perfect parents and are constantly walking a tightrope. If our children don't meet our expectations or societal expectations, they don't do as well as we hope they will, or don't connect with us as they used to in their earlier years, we feel disheartened. Sometimes we feel lost, and sometimes we need a guiding light. For this purpose of guidance and sharing, we have with us today Ms. Akanksha Pandey. A very warm welcome to you, Akanksha. Akanksha is currently working as a consultant clinical psychologist at Fortis Hospital, Bengaluru, and she has 6 years of experience in the field of mental health. She has pursued her MPhil in clinical psychology and has been trained in child and adolescent mental health, adult psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry, consulting lies in psychiatry, neuropsychology, and management of psychological issues. She has been a part of research and academic programs and has contributed as an author in psychiatry textbooks as well as leading newspapers. So, very, very warm welcome to you, Akanksha. And we're really happy to have you here amidst us. I'm sure you can, um, help us and help the parent body and bust some of the common myths that we have and make us all understand how to better connect and guide this young gen, especially in this time, which has, in fact, heightened mental health issues and highlighted the need for actually being a holistic being, not only focusing on academics but also making sure that there is emotional well-being, there is social well-being. So we'd love to hear your insights. And before I hand it over to you, I'd also like to let all parents know that you're most welcome to share your queries in the chat box. And at the end of the session, after the presentation, we'll have our psychology faculty member, Ms. Vandana Nair. She's going to be taking up the queries, and I'm sure Akanksha will be able to answer them for you. So looking forward to a fruitful session. Over to you, Akanksha.
Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, you're audible, Akanksha.
All right. So I really look forward to this conversation because it happens to be one of the most important and sensitive areas that needs to be discussed, that needs to be spoken about. Um, because of course, it has a lot to do with the children, and children, they happen to be the most sensitive, delicate uh, section of the population, and we have to be very much uh, prepared to deal with it. Like madam said, that there's nothing like a perfect parenting, there's nothing like there's a particular way of parenting, or there's a rule book for parenting. So but still I believe parenting is an art rather than making it a project. So with this I would like to move on about talking about parenting. So like I said, parenting is something that the most common thing that has been noticed about parents, or whenever I've interacted with them, maybe in my clinical practice, or maybe whenever I go for workshops and webinars and talks, I've seen that a lot of parents have the pressure of being a parent, of being a very good perfect parent. And if I ask any one of them, there is no such book which gives you a definition of a perfect parent, because there is nothing called as that. So we have to first of all understand that parenting is a process, it is an art, it is a skill, and it is something which is dynamic in nature. You keep on learning, you keep on exploring, you keep on building up new skills every single day. No parent, like other courses and other jobs and all, we are given certain training. Parenting is one of the most important skill set, but I think we receive no training for that. It is only observational training that we get, maybe seeing your parents or your relatives being a parent. So we learn a little bit from there, and then we have a bit of our touch into it, and that's how we just grow as parent. And that's how it should be, just that with a little bit of better understanding about what our children need. Parenting is not all about what a parent needs. Parenting is a lot about what the child needs. For child, you know uh, child is like a sapling. If the sapling is not growing, you don't find a mistake in the sapling, you try to fix the environment, you fix the environment, and the sapling will grow. Same holds true for the parenting as well, for children as well. So let us try to understand what is this positive parenting. And of course, now, one small disclaimer: I understand we are talking about positive parenting, but of course I do believe it from the bottom of my heart that every parent has the right intention always. They always put in their best efforts. So me talking about it is nowhere trying to communicate that anyone is less. Maybe there are a little bit of information and knowledge that we can exchange from my clinical practice and from my experience with children and parents. So let's understand what is this positive parenting. In order to understand that, let us first try to understand what are the common mistakes that adults make. And these mistakes, again, these are not the intentional ones, these are very normal part of the process. It is not something that we can characterize or categorize parents as being good or bad. It is very normal for parents to go through all of that. But also it is equally important for us to be able to identify that, tap on it, and maybe bring in the required changes. So very commonly we often see that, and I'm sure you would have heard a lot of your time, that comparison happens to be one of the most commonly done mistake and very unintentional mistakes. A healthy comparison, healthy competition is something that we must instill in our children. But I think when it goes down to comparing your child with others, comparing their uniqueness, or making your children copy others, or using it as a way of punishment, is when it goes into a completely wrong direction. In fact, surprisingly, today only I had father and a son coming to the hospital for a consultation. And the first I had spoken to the father, he gave me a list of the problems that he brought the child with. When I spoke to the child separately, the first thing that the boy said, the parents father's complaint was that he answers back and he does not respect me as a parent, me as a father. He often answers back, and he doesn't care what he's saying in front of others. Now when I spoke to the boy separately, the only thing that he said was that he couldn't really find the fault in that, because he said, I see that my father also doing the same. He often compares me with my friends, with my cousins, in front of their parents. In order to appreciate others children in front of them, he often ends up belittling me. Now I 100% know that the intent of the father is not to belittle the child, but somewhere it is taking a wrong direction. So comparison, basically, even between the siblings, even between the cousins, even between the friends, or schoolmates, batchmates, it should be avoided at any cost, because it actually doesn't lead to any positive result. It may make you communicate what you want to say to the child, but it is absolutely on the wrong direction. It definitely causes the child to go through a lot of self-esteem issues. The child ends up developing a lot of doubt, self-doubt, doubts about themselves. They may end up having a lot of guilt that they're not good enough, and that's why they are always compared to the others. And they always lack the confidence about themselves to do something, to be able to show or showcase their skills, because they will always have a doubt that the other person is doing it better. Or they may be the ones who may end up growing with a tendency for a lot of reassurance seeking, where they are always dependent on others about their feedback, or how others are doing, let me copy the same. So when you compare your children amongst each other, or with the other students and friends, we often end up making them feel little less confident about themselves, and they lack the ability to navigate the journey of life independently. They often show a lot of dependent skills also. So comparison happens to be one of the mistakes that a lot of parents do without having, noting it consciously. The second mistakes, role models. We now, role models don't always have to be the parents. They can be anybody, they can be grandparents, they can be relatives, they can be some celebrities, some social figures, public figures, or maybe a friend. It's not necessary for me to have Mother Teresa only as my role model, or my mother or father only as my role model. It can be my friend also. But um, parents definitely happen to be very strong role models, sometimes very consciously, sometimes even unconsciously. Children learn the most of their behaviors from their parents, from the home environment. Yes, they are exposed to a lot of other people and situations. They do pick up a lot from that, but a very unconscious learning happens at home, which is what we call as latent learning, as in you keep on grasping a lot of things very unconsciously and you don't even realize that you're learning out of that. So parents happen to be the most primary level of role models. Now, if you display a particular behavior, your child will definitely uh, learn that behavior. A lot of times parents come and say that we don't know why the child is doing like that, and he always answers back and he's so defiant and very oppositional in his behavior. But they often fail to look at themselves and identify. The first question that should come in the mind is, where is the child getting it from? No child comes with any learning from the womb. They don't know anything. They come very fresh and pure. They don't know anything. So whatever they are learning, whatever they are displaying is coming from the environment, be it their school, be it their home, be it their parents, friends, whatever. But it is definitely a learned behavior. Now, if my child is displaying a particular behavior, it's very easy for the parents to say, oh, maybe he's in a bad company. So yes, that could be a possibility, but we often fail to point the fingers at ourselves and ask, are we also encouraging this behavior? Maybe is the child learning through observation, or maybe the child is learning maybe out of some situation, but we also happen to reinforce that behavior, reward that behavior, encourage that behavior for our convenience, and then later on be skeptical about it. So it's very important for us to understand that role models matter. My child is going to display a lot what he's learning at home from us. So if we take our responsibility, I think a lot of problems are fixed. It's easy to say that he's learning wrong from the school or from friends, and teachers are not being cared, being disciplined and all of that. But if we only take the responsibility of ourselves, we will be focusing on to what is in our control. So that becomes a very important part that the parents must take care of. We often uh, make our children learn a lot of behavior through our behavior, the way we display our behavior. The next most common mistake, I think this is the story of almost every house, the shouting match, when mostly and especially, in these times when both the parents are working most of the times and they are working, or even if one parent is working and the other one is a house homemaker, the homemaker also ends up having a lot of responsibility on their head. So, it's a very tight packed schedule for everyone. You don't have time to really sit down and, communicate what you want your child to do. So we often end up saying it once, and if the child says no, we instead of getting into the details of it, we may also immediately retaliate. The child may retaliate. So basically, it ends up coming out as a shouting match, and no point is actually being communicated to anybody. So it is a complete futile effort. And the child in this process ends up learning that this is how we talk, because all right from the beginning, we are told to idolize our parents. We are told that, you learn everything what our parents do is correct. So we end up picking up a habit that, okay, if you want to communicate something, it has to be done in a loud manner, it has to be shouted through. And also, no becomes a very common terminology for them. No, the real meaning of no is that the activity should stop or it should not be done in the first place. But when the no is the first response that a parent gives for any particular behavior, the child ends up learning that no is just like any other word, and you can just spill it anywhere. And that's where a lot of shouting match happens, when there is a disconnect in the frequency, when the child is not explained why they are supposed to do what they are supposed to do. Or sometimes, yes, I do understand there can be a lot of tantrums that the child may throw, which can lead a parent to get into a kind of argument with the child. So shouting match happens to be one of the very, very common scenario in most of the households, and that is something which has to be a point of concern, because the child ends up learning the same, and they will also display the same when they go out, or when they are growing up and when they become a parent. So that happens to be one of the most common mistakes. Inconsistency, I think this is something very logical and reasonable here. lot of times, when we are in a good mood, a lot of our behaviors are driven by our manners are driven by our mood, which should not be the case. When I'm happy, I will be showering love to my child. If he's even, doing a silly mistake, we will ignore that and we'll be, laughing it off. Or we may shower too much of love and praise for the smallest of the achievement also. But if our mood is not okay, or if we are busy in something, we may end up doing exact opposite of what we did the other day. So that happens to be one of the biggest problems. Now, this inconsistency may cause a kind of double bind as in giving two conflicting messages. So the child will know that, okay, my achievement is not what gets me, praise and affection from my parents. It is their mood. So they learn to, start manipulating. They learn to impress. They know that if I impress my parent, if I make them good, turn them in a good mood, or if I need something, I only have to approach them when they are in a good mood. So that's a kind of, instilling manipulativeness, or, too much of calculating tendency, or they end up, misusing the whole concept. So inconsistency happens to be one of the very common mistakes, and it is important that you be consistent in your reaction to your child. If they are doing wrong, they are doing wrong, and they should be communicated that it doesn't matter whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood. And what is right, if they have done something good and they want to show you, even if you're busy, yes, I do understand sometimes you may be in a meeting, or you're about to do a presentation, or you are busy in a project, or sometimes your days may be too stressful. So those days, yes, maybe your intensity of showing your affection may not be the same, but it should not be zero. It should not be, it should not be a complete opposite, as in, one day you appreciate it and the other day you just blasted at the child for doing the same thing. So the child ends up being very confused, and they may develop a lot of complications into their psychological understanding. So you have to be consistent, of course, in your reaction, be it the good behavior or the bad behavior. If the child is displaying a bad behavior, be it anywhere, even if it is at home or if it is outside home, your response to it remains the same. And the administration of rewards and punishment both has to be very consistent. Every time the child does something good, yes, you must appreciate that. Sometimes you may do it too loudly, or sometimes you may do it little lesser, but it should not you should not fail to show your appreciation or any kind of bad behavior. You must display your disappointment also with that. How you do that, of course, happens to be one of the most important area that we'll discuss. So consistency across setting is also very important, and the moment you lack this consistency, yes, your child may end up learning a lot of manipulativeness out of it. Corporal punishment. Now, this happens to be a heavy word here, but yes, it often is. It's not a very new or uncommon concept here. Even like today's example that I gave, a lot of, the child who came, he just did tell me that when everything fails, ultimately it is the slap, or it is some kind of physical abuse, which gets the work done for my father. So that is something which is not a very desirable activity. We have to always understand as a parent that no child is bad. It is a behavior which is either good or bad. If you focus onto the target the problem, the real problem, probably you'll be able to reach to some solution. But if you target the person for that, it won't happen, because a child's behavior is a result of something in the environment which made him do that. It could be anything, but something in the environment for sure. So if I use punishment, the beating or slapping or physical abuse or verbal abuse, it does not really serve any purpose, because it completely fails to stop the undesired behavior. Maybe the child will not show it in front of you, but will do it definitely behind your back or in a forbidden manner. It definitely models aggression, because the child is getting a message that if people are not doing what you expect them to do, you can always use physical aggression or verbal aggression to get your job done, which is definitely a wrong message. It is a very much of a learned behavior which increases violence in children. It may, creates a lot of negative emotions in the child towards parent. If a child is doing something wrong, they are to be taught. Yes, I'm not saying that it should be ignored. They should be taught. They should be told that it is wrong, and they must always be told that why it is wrong and what should be done. Most of the time, it is being noticed that we are very quick in telling the child that no, it should not be done, but we often fail to let them know the logic behind it, like why it should not be done. Or when the child asks or questions about it, we often label the child as being very argumentative, or the child answer backs and disobedient, and he just tries to prove himself more smart. It is not that. It is just the child's curiosity. Some children are submissive, they may just believe it because the parent is saying, but some children are quite active, they want to know the reasons behind thing, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They should know why they are being told that this should not be done, and what happens when it is done, what is the good of it, what is the bad of it. And when you tell somebody to not do this behavior, we must also give the replacement or substitution for that, as in what you must do. So if I want my child to communicate his or her need in a particular way, and he's doing in the wrong way, I have to let them know that it is not okay. I have to let them know why it is not okay. And then I also have to let them know how they should be doing it. Or maybe, we can engage them in a conversation where we can ask them to come up with different ways of communicating. So it engages the child, it develops kind of critical thinking in them, and a reasonable a reasoning kind of a concept in their mind. So it is very important to avoid hitting or punishment of any sort uh, as much as possible, because the moment we have this option available, we often fail to consider other options. So it only increases violence, it makes the child have a negative emotion towards the parent, they may end up developing hatred towards the parent, they may distance themselves from the parent, which actually can be a bigger problem. Children till they are 18, they need a lot of wise counsel with the parents. They need their parents to be friendly and be present around them, because that is a very delicate age, and they are very vulnerable to getting stuck into bad companies or bad wrong choices. So if they are getting distant from the parent at this point of age, it can actually turn out to be more devastating and more difficult or complicated. So it's very important that avoid punishments. It only makes the child impulsive, it makes the child develop lying, manipulation, or truancy, and all of that behavior. It also diminishes the child's ability to cope with the negative emotions. They don't know what to do about it. So they may start completely hiding away. They may become very passive. They may become isolated and disinterested into a lot of things. Overscheduling, I think, is one of the most commonly seen problems. Overscheduling is what very layman term for it is, helicopter parenting, as in, you're always on the child's head throughout, their day, always calculating and intruding into their life, as in what they're doing. So the second thing that the boy in the morning told me was that, there is too much of intrusion. So I was surprised to hear this term from a 14-year-old boy, because I didn't expect that he should know all of that. But he did say that, he's always on my head. I don't have time to think in a free way, in a creative manner. I am not like other boys, I'm not like other children. I am somebody who likes to think creatively, and I don't get that space. And creativity only comes from space. Now I can give him a good long lecture on it, but actually I stopped myself and I asked myself why. I don't think he's being wrong anyway. What he's asking for is a very genuine right. So scheduling is okay, but that does not mean that you have to micromanage every single minute of your day of your child. A lot of times it has been seen that yes, parents help the child to make a timetable. That's a very wonderful thing. That's a role, that's a very facilitating job that you're doing for your child. So it helps them, it gives them a kind of support and direction. But the moment you get into the micromanagement part, as in checking on to every minute, what are you doing now? Are you doing that? How much have you studied? Have you done this chapter? How many topics are left? And what are your friends talking about? What do you do when you go? Everything, micromanagement is always and always a very counterproductive trait. It leads to a lot of exhaustion, it leads to a lot of interpersonal issues and a bad way of conflict resolution. So overscheduling should be avoided. It is all about you being a facilitator and not a manager for them. Inflexible parenting approach, a lot of times we believe that what my parents have done is the best way of doing it, or what other parents are doing is the best way of doing, or sometimes I feel that whatever I am doing is the only best way. So parenting, like I said in the beginning, it is a dynamic process. So dynamic means it has to be very flexible, it has to be very exploratory, it has to be creative. You have to bring in a lot of new ways. You following a conventional, see, learning from your parents something is very good, but you have to always understand that every child is a unique child. Every child has a unique brain. They have a unique behavior, unique set of internal factors which makes them the way they are. So if I apply the same rule what was applied to me, or what is being applied to the neighbor's child, I don't think it will work out very well, because in that whole process somewhere I'm compromising the flexibility or the individualness of my child. So that individuality should not be compromised. you have to bring in a kind of flexible parenting approach, as in sometimes I do have to be strict, but sometimes I do have to be a friend. In earlier generation, if we go back maybe one or two generations back, yes, there is a belief that fathers don't really cuddle their boys or their daughters, because the physical touch is only the mother's thing. So those, for maybe there were some reasons for it. There's no point for me to sit and criticize those behavior, but there could have been reasons for that. But that does not mean just because my father did it, I have to do the same. I have to question myself why I don't have to do. What if my child needs it? What does it do, the good and bad? So you have to be a little bit curious about the way you are developing as a parent, and you have to ask yourself, am I just following something that has been laid out all these generations, or can I bring in a kind of a creative touch, or shall I understand my child better and their needs better and then bring in a little bit of flexible ways? So being totally conventional may not work as a parenting style. A flexibility and a bit of creativity is extremely appreciated. Now the ideal role of parents, as per what it should be, it is, like I said, it's not just to grow them up to adults. It is an art, it is a skill. So what are those skill set that you need to be working on? A lot of times it is seen that we parents, if we consider any of us, it's very commonly seen that the moment your child comes running to you with a problem, we often jump to you know uh, with the intention of trying to solve the problem. A lot of times we fail to understand that our job as a parent is to be a facilitator. Our job is not to be the problem solver for them. Our job is not to own up their problems. We have to be the facilitator. As in, the first thing that you can do is, whenever your child is in stress or is in a crisis or needs you, you have to first make your presence felt, but not in a controlling way or demanding way, or authority, very very much very strict or very demanding in that manner for that example. But you have to make your presence felt as a facilitator, as somebody where the child can comfortably come running and talk about what's bothering them, rather than running away from you. So how do you do that? First of all, the most important thing I think with the children is to have a very wonderful communication style, which does not demand too much of talking. It demands a lot of listening. Whenever your child is coming to you with a problem or anything they want to say, the moment we tell them that no, 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 it's not like that, you don't have to think that way, you be strong, you don't have to cry over things, somewhere we are invalidating their feelings, even if it is sounding completely silly, even if the child is blowing something out of a proportion. At least giving them a fair chance to say out whatever they want to say happens to be the most important thing. Because if you the moment you say no, no, it's not like that, you should not feel like that, you are somewhere making the child suppress what they want to say. A free flow of expression is extremely important for children. The moment we stop it, it causes invalidation, it makes the child suppress it, it makes the child feel that, oh, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I create nonsense, or maybe I'm too weak as a person, that's why I come running to the parent. What you need to do first is, the first thing that you have to do is make sure, when your child is talking to you, make an eye contact with them. If you are busy in something, let them know that I'm really interested to listen to what is happening, just give me a quick minute to finish off what I'm doing, and then so that I can give you proper time. I just don't want to hear it, I want to listen to it. So you communicate this to them, and children reciprocate very well to proper communication. You look into their eye, you make them sit at your level, and it should never be you looking down at them, it should always be at the eye level. And when they are talking, allow them to talk. When they're talking, do not stop them. Even if you have an urge to say something, hold yourself, let them say whatever they want to say, and only listen. It is called as active listening. Active listening means that I'm listening with the intent of helping the person the way they want to be helped. That brings in the concept of empathy, as in, you put, while you're listening to them, don't be a parent when you're listening, try to listen to it being in their position. So you try to just listen, put yourself there, and then see what is the child really looking forward to. They don't look forward to your solutions. What they look forward is somebody to hear them out completely. When you are able to let your child say it out, express whatever they want to express, by the end of it, when they are done, you only have to ask one question to them: how do you want me to help you with? The moment you ask them, it gives the child a scope for critical thinking, reasoning, understanding. Okay, what am I feeling? Reflecting onto their feelings. Maybe once you allow them to talk it out completely, end of it, they may say, no, I think, maybe I also overreacted, or maybe let me see what I can do about it. Now, this is very important. One of the very important role of parents is to make their children grow to be independent. If you solve every problem of their life, if you jump to solve the problems, if you don't allow them to take their own battles, they will end up becoming dependent. And see, if we had to live 300, 400 years, we can do that. But someday we all have to leave. So we have to make sure that our children are growing up to be very independent and they know how to fix the problem of their life. We often, train our children and people to avoid all kind of grief, to never become sad, to never become upset, which actually is not a very good thing, because sadness, grief, or some upside down events, they are bound to happen no matter how prepared you are in life. So when I don't prepare my child to deal with them, they will be lost at some point of time. So it's very important to make them learn the coping skills and not the escaping skills, or somebody doing their job for themselves. It is very important, if your child is coming, if the child is crying, don't immediately stop them and tell them, hey, don't be a weak boy, don't be a shy boy. Let them say what they have to say. When they are done, you let them, feel normal about what they're feeling. If they are crying, don't make them feel shy or bad about it. And then maybe you can just put one question to them, looking into their eye: how do you want me to help you with? And then maybe if they want some solution, then you can give your solution. It should never be an unsolicited advice, because that is never respected. That is never, it never gives you any good outcome. So make sure that you convey your support verbally, you take interest in hearing when they're talking, you should be giving the nod, you should be looking into the eye, you should be giving the right expression on your face. It should not be like you're listening and you're also using your phone or looking here and there. The child should feel that I am being heard right now. And express your concern when the child is upset, give them their space, allow them to think and come back to you as in how they want to be helped, what do they want to do about it. It encourages a lot of critical thinking in the child, and of course, which has a lot to do with their overall intelligence also. Individual guidance, it is, I think, very important. It acknowledges your child's uniqueness. Yes, when the child goes to the school, they are taught in a generalized manner, although teachers do take care of the fact that every child is unique, and they always have that eye that which child needs a little bit of extra supervision, or which child has what kind of a behavior. But at home, you have to make sure that you give your child, even if you have two or three children or one child, make sure that there has to be a lot of individual guidance, which means that you first learn to understand your child. You first have to understand their individuality. You have to understand their tendencies, their traits, their temperament, their character. When you understand all of that, is when you bring in the right set of skills or tools to be able to deal with their behavior. It only modifies the parenting approach to suit the child, and you still do the thing that is needed, but you do it in a way which is suiting your child's need. You accept that your parenting approach will be different toward each child. If you have two children, please do not try to apply the same parenting approach to both, because they both are children. They're coming out of same parents, but they are both unique in their own ways. Never fail to identify the uniqueness of your child, be it the good part or the bad part, but always understand the uniqueness of the problem solving method that you use. Maybe what works as a reward for one child may not be the reward for the other child. What works as a punishment for one child may not be the same for the other child. So don't try to apply a common approach to the children. Some things may be common. For example, the rules in the house can be common, the structure of the day can be common, but how you engage with the child can be absolutely individual. Emotional regulation, like I said, we often tell our children that to never feel sad, to never be upset, always be strong enough. No, we don't have to teach that. Sometimes we have, emotions are something which is an integral part of our existence, which is what makes us humans. So we have to understand that emotions are not to be avoided, they are to be dealt and they are to be regulated as per the situation. You avoid this emotion, it's just like denial. You're just pushing it out of your sight, but it doesn't get out of your mind. It is there at the back of your mind, which constantly drives your behavior in a particular way. A lot of times we may feel that my child has no problem, but I don't know why he's behaving like that. Maybe they're not getting enough emotional expression. Maybe they are suppressing a lot of what they are feeling. They are failing to share with people what they are feeling, or they are denying the presence of a particular emotion. So it's very important that you assist your children in managing the emotion. If the child is coming crying, if the child is angry, don't immediately preach them, because it will go waste completely, and the child will also develop a kind of resistance towards your solution. So it's very important that you first let the child be. If they want to cry, give them time, be silent. I think the biggest skill that we should learn in life is active listening. I mean, just listening. not saying. We often jump to solve, which is not okay. You need to listen to them. They're crying, let them cry. Once they're done crying, then you need to ask them, what made you cry? What was the situation? And then make them read, look into the whole situation. Maybe once they're done crying, you can ask them, is there any other way we can look into the situation? Could there be a different possibility? Did this really happen? Or maybe you end up seeing that. So you give them an open-ended question and let them find an answer for that from a very neutral state of mind. If you make them suppress their emotions, those emotions may not be displayed on the face, but they will definitely shape the way they are talking, the way they are responding to the situation. It might be full of irritability or answering back, or some kind of frustration always in their tone. So we have to understand that that could be the impact of pent up emotions. And children anyway, they fail to express their emotions like adults. So we have to encourage that process, that it's okay to feel what you feel, but we have to help them acknowledge what you're feeling, help them label their emotions. They should be able to say that I'm feeling sad, and then we can get into the details of it and teach them the right ways of expressing their negative emotions. Never teach your children to not have negative emotions. It is impossible. It is totally impossible. So tell them that negative emotions are very much a part of our existence, and we need to know how to deal with it rather than escaping it. Instill a lot of coping mechanisms into your child. Observational learning, like I said, parents happen to be one of the most important role models, chosen, unchosen, but they are for sure. We do learn a lot from our behaviors. And, when we grow up is when we realize, I think, I learned a lot from my father. I learned a lot from my mother. So it's very important that you display the right kind of a behavior in front of the children. That does not mean that you always have to be the perfect parent. A lot of times I see that, parents end up becoming too perfect. They become so correct that sometimes it takes away the fun element out of it. A child must grow up with a lot of fun and entertainment in their learning process. So if you become too perfect, if you become too moralistic, too much correct, that also is a problem. I'm only talking about that the way you communicate, the way you respond to a problem, the way you deal with the child, the way you talk to people, the way you solve a problem, that is what the child learns from you. So make sure that should be demonstrated in a positive manner. If I see that my mother has always been, the moment she gets into any kind of a crisis, she overreacts, so I will learn that this is how we are supposed to react, right? So somewhere we have to understand that what behavior am I displaying to the child, that should be taken care of. But when we are having fun, when we are engaging with the child in a entertaining manner, at that point of time you should be as free as possible. You should be as silly with them. You should be sitting on the floor. You should be trying out all silly ways, all creative ways to engage with them, a lot of playfulness in your approach. So that is what has to be there when you are having fun. But the other times, don't always try to be a very perfect and correct parent. Be right in your ways. Make sure that you're not giving a negative learning to your child, which could be the way you solve the problem, the way you communicate to people, or the way you communicate to them also. So because children often learn that this is how you talk to people who are younger than you or below you in any particular aspect. How do you screen for the problems? How do you know if your child is at a risk or any kind of a problem is there? There are four ways that we often identify. One is checking on their psychological development. If the child is showing any emotional dysregulation, as in a lot of negative emotions are often expressed, or the child is getting into answering back, or the child is being isolated and not talking and always crying, or always being anxious all the time, is when or doesn't know how to deal with their anger, or they have a poor self-esteem, is how we rule out if there is any problem at the psychological development area. Social development, when the child shows low self-care behavior, don't care about themselves, they don't like to spend time with themselves, they don't engage in grooming properly, or they have poor communication style or poor interpersonal relationships, or they don't want to meet people, they are often avoidant in their approaches, they're often anxious when meeting new people. So that could be a red flag sign for the social development. Academic development, the moment you notice that the child, once in a while your child may definitely have low grades, which has nothing to do with something wrong happening in their life. It is absolutely fine, because when the children are growing up, there are a lot of hormonal changes which definitely impacts their attention, concentration, and learning power. But if you feel that the grades are falling low continuously and persistently, is when it is a significant red flag sign for the academic development, which could be because of a lot of factors. poor classroom participation, if your teachers are letting you know that the child is not participating, the child is aloof and isolated, or always busy in some mischief, or is showing some learning difficulties, it is very important that you pay heed to it, because teachers are the first line of communication for you what happens to the child in school, because they spend a lot of time in the school. So and teachers are well trained, and these days a lot of training workshops are happening for the teachers to identify psychological problems in children. So if the teachers are communicating something, please do give it a thought, and do try to understand where is the problem coming from, to try to be a partner with the teacher rather than questioning them only, because when you and the teacher have a good team, that definitely will bring out a wonderful child. Behavioral development, if there is any kind of inadequate toilet training or bullying happening, or some kind of a truancy behavior where the child is running away from the school, or lying or defiance towards the authority, that can be a significant red sign for the behavioral development. So any of these, if you notice persistently, if you notice something once in a while, it should not be a cause of concern. But if you notice something happening on a persistent level, is when you must take a cognizance of it, and you need to discuss it with the child, you need to discuss it with the teacher or the counselor in the school to understand what could be done. So as a parent, I think you need to have a lot of problem solving behavior rather than just identifying the problem and blaming, or leaving it to fate or whatever, or blaming some external force for it, or blaming the child for it, or punishing the child. I think the first responsibility of a parent is to own the responsibility. That to know that, not to own the responsibility as you are the cause of it, no, owning the responsibility to fix it by finding out what could be causing that behavior. Like I said, the child is never bad, it is either a behavior which is good or bad, and there are always reasons for a child to behave in a particular way. Child's bad behavior, as per the researchers, is often a child's cry for help, because an adult can say that this is disturbing me and I'm feeling this, I'm feeling irritable. A child will not understand why they are irritable, but if a child is irritable, that means there is something in the environment which is impacting the child in a negative manner. If you can figure out what is that and work it out, I think that is where you will be very successful as a parent. What's your parenting style is very important to know. Some parents are very reciprocal, as in they are demanding but they are supportive also. They expect from the child, but they also are child centered. They also try to support them in getting what they want the child to do. Then there is authoritarian parents, where the relationship is very controlling, very power assertive, as in you look down to the child and you expect them to do just because you're a parent, and they should never say you or no. And it is usually unidirectional communication, as in I say and you only listen, you never say, where the parent is demanding but very unsupportive. They want a lot out of the child, but they don't know how to help the child to get that. Now, that's not a very healthy style of the parenting. Reciprocal parenting is something which is a very admired and desired parenting, because that encourages the child to be communicative, to express, and also to own up the responsibility for their behavior. And of course, they look forward to their parents as a facilitator for their growth. The third type of parenting is permissive parenting, where the parents are very undemanding. They really expect very little out of the child, but they're also supportive in some or the other way. As in, if they want something, they want to do something, you will help them out, but you don't expect anything. So they want to do something, we will help them, but we don't have any expectation. This is it is an indulgent relationship, but it is very low in control attempts. It can be partially helpful sometimes, but mostly that's not what you as a parent should be doing. Yes, you must let the child know what do you expect out of them, but in a supportive manner. Last is the indifferent style, where where the parents are very undemanding and they are also very unsupportive. They don't want the child to do, they don't expect the child to do any particular thing, and they're also very unsupportive towards their need. I don't ask you, you don't ask me. So that's a very negligent kind of a parenting. It makes the child feel very alone. It makes the child become very anxious, because they don't know who to depend upon. They feel very they always have a fear of being abandoned. They always have a fear of being unsupported or left all of a sudden. So it has been found that children who are born out of are raised out of the indifferent parenting, they often have anxiety issues in the adulthood. Or the parents who are born out of authoritarian parenting, they often have very again the self-esteem issues, they have anger issues, they have pent up emotions, they end up becoming very compulsive, controlling, and they also may have a lot of like I said, low self-esteem and low confidence. So that is something that should be taken. You must identify what is your current. Now, this is not for you to feel, oh my God, we fall in this category. No, it is only for you to be insightful. We can only fix a situation when I know I can fix my behavior when I know what my behavior is. So it's very important that you have to accept or identify what you are in the most unbiased and the truthful manner. So you have to identify, where do I fall in right now? Okay, this is the problem why, we are having a lot of shouting match at home and my child is not able to have a connect with me. And this is what I need to do. Probably I need to be demanding, but I need to be supportive as well. So it's very important that you identify your parenting style and then bring in the kind of changes that are required. Modern day challenges, yes, there are a lot of, unfortunately, with this pandemic, yes. Earlier, it used to be outdoor activity was not possible because we live in societies where there is no place for the children to go out, or even if they go out, we feel scared, or we are often, like I said, very controlling parents sometimes, or too worried parents that, the child should be inside home, or, we put them into so many classes and tuitions that they often lack the outdoor activity. And children are a complete package of physical energy. They have to burn off that energy. If that energy doesn't get burned out, it always gets manifest into destructive activities within the home. So it's very important that they should be given that physical outlet. If that is lacking, then that would definitely lead to a lot of behavioral problems. Although I do understand at this point of time we cannot really send out our children, but engage, encourage, reinforce your children to engage in a lot of tiring physical activity, even being at home. You can set up a room for their physical activity where you should not stop them from doing what they're doing. You should give them a free space. It's okay for them to fall and fail and get hurt sometimes. All you have to do is, your role as a parent is to help them get up and get back to the same activity and not avoid that activity. We often say, see, I told you. That should not be the case, because the child will feel that, okay, maybe whatever I think is always wrong, and I should always look up to other people. So make sure that you give them a free space to vent out their physical energy, and do not correct them when they're doing a particular thing, when they are playing, when they are whatever activity they choose. The intent is to get them physically burned out, tired, so that they feel the unnecessary energy is exhausted and they are able to focus on to the other activities. The time management is very important, but it should not be overscheduling. It should not be micromanaging. I think you should encourage your child to take the ownership of fixing up their day or having a structure in the day. You don't make a timetable for them. You can definitely facilitate them by letting them know what should be the important activities that can be considered. Let your child frame the first draft. Let the child bring it to you, and then maybe you can have a discussion about it. That, not a critical discussion, but yes, a discussion about, what could be, fixed in the timetable, or what modifications can be made, and that too with the consent of the child, where the child owns the responsibility. When the child owns the responsibility, it is high likely that they are going to perform it for a longer duration. And no timetable should be expected to be followed for life or for months together. The timetable has to be flexible. You need to keep bringing on new timetables, maybe after weeks, or some children, they only need a timetable for a day, and then next day they again make their timetable, which is called as to-do list. So ensure adequate number of hours of sleep for your children. Make sure the sleep is not compromised at any cost, because if the sleep is compromised, it will display in their irritability or frustration and anger and all of that. So you help the child to leave some structured time in the day. You always allow your child to have a me time in their routine. Never cut off the playtime, even if it is one day before the exam. Trust me, don't cut off the playtime. In fact, one day before the exam, 45 minutes of play activity is very, very important, because it gives them a healthy dissociation. It encourages a healthy neurochemical balance in the body, which makes them prepared for the next day, which reduces their anxiety and puts them in a positive state of mind. Or always allow your children to come up with their own routine. Allow them the creativity and flexibility into the timetable, and make sure that the children are always including a lot of break time in between their schedule. There's a concept of micro break and macro break. 15 minutes, 5 minutes of a break after every 45 minutes of study, and maybe 30 minutes of break after every 2 to 3 hours of any particular activity. So this is how probably you can help them with their time management. Use of gadgets, I know it is on a rise like anything, but we are also helpless here right now. In fact, we are thankful that we have internet and we have laptops and everything. Otherwise, just imagine the pandemic without internet and laptops. God forbid what the situation would have been. But definitely, having said that, I do understand that we should be aware of our digital addiction. But again, this can only be fixed when we fix our behavior. If I am somebody who is constantly into the phone and laptops and TV, I can't expect my child to be doing that. If you take away the gadget from a child, if you tell your child don't spend too much of time in the screen, you must always tell them, like I said, the reason of not doing that, and how to replace that. What do you do? Because when the child sees that when my father is not using the phone, he's just lying in the bed. He switches off the phone but goes to TV. He switches off the TV, he goes to the laptop. So when the child doesn't see you doing anything other than the screen activity, the child will also end up learning the same. But when the child sees, okay, my dad goes for soccer in the morning, or he goes for a basketball match, or he goes for a walk, or he spends time with his friends, he spends time in the garden, he spends time with the mother. So when they see all of that activities, when they will learn all of that. So don't just take away the things, always give them a substitution for that. Tantrums, how do you deal with that? I mean, they can be very irritating, they can be very disturbing, and I know you all are parents of grown up children, but tantrum can always be displayed in some or the other way. So when you see that your child is throwing up a tantrum, you don't have to deny it, or you don't have to get under the pressure of it. You always ignore the problematic behavior and not the child. If the child is behaving in a tantrum manner, be consistent in the way you deal with it. Don't at home it should be different. If the child is throwing a tantrum in a public area or an outside space, don't get worried about it. Make sure that your behavior, your response to that tantrum is consistent, and it should never be giving into their demands. You should understand what they're trying to say, but you should let them know that only when they talk properly, only when they communicate properly is when you're going to listen to them. Otherwise, that's not how it will be appreciated. So uniformity in both the parents rule approach is very important. A lot of time what happens is the other parent may give up to the child's need. That is not okay, which is where the child may end up misusing that as manipulation and all. So it's very important that parents must be uniform, and there has to be a lot of unity into a lot of parenting approach. Yes, sometimes when one parent is strict, the other one can give a little bit of emotional warmth, but on certain areas the rule has to be very strict that they both are not going to tolerate that particular behavior. So avoid losing your cool in those times. Just be calm and ignore that behavior. If a particular behavior is not given attention, that dies off on its own. The more you give attention to it, the more it is encouraged. The siblings, I know a lot of parents do come to me, they say that siblings fight a lot, or they often have a lot of jealousy with each other. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to avoid the comparison. The other one is doing, if he can do, why can't you do? We are giving the same amount of things to him, he requires such less attention, but he's doing so much. So that is not the right way you do. Like I said, every child is unique, their needs are unique, and there's nothing like a good rule book that okay, if my child does this, he's a good child, he's a bad child. No, avoid the comparison, encourage a lot of communication. If you have 2 children, 3 children, maybe one child may be very quiet, one child may be too outspoken. So you have to respect that understanding. You don't have to tell. A lot of times I see parents come and say, my one child is very extrovert, but the other one is very introvert. So they look down at somebody who's introvert. Now we have to understand that introversion is not a bad trait. It is the way you deal with a particular situation. It is the way you have your decision making and all. So it is not a good or a bad trait. It is just an explanation about the person. Similarly, somebody who's extrovert does not mean that he's very, we understand it in a wrong way. Extroverts can also display problematic behavior. Introverts can also, similarly, they can also display very good behaviors too. So don't take, this as a way of judging your child. Whenever your sibling, your children are in a kind of an argument, never take a side in that argument, even if you know that one is right. Make sure you let them deal and settle them at their own. Once they are cooled down, then only you need to talk with them, and you need to give an explanation about why that behavior was correct or not. The moment you take side in the argument at that point of time, in a heated moment, it will never give you the right the outcome. So, sometimes the timeout strategy is very important, as in, we will not discuss this, we will just keep it aside, we will do something else, and then we'll come back to it. Basically, it helps you because you, by that time, the impulse, the emotions would have settled down, and you can have a more meaningful conversation. One of the problems is smaller family. Earlier, there used to be a large family. If the child has had any kind of an argument, or if the parents are busy, or they're not able to look into a particular behavior, there are many other people in the family who would be able to identify a problem or settle it at their own level. Now that we have a smaller families, yes, I know it becomes too much of a pressure onto the parent to be working and to always look at their child also. That is one of the challenges that we as a society is facing. So, what tips for the parenting that I can say here is that encourage a lot of playful parenting in your routine. Make sure you're not just following the conventional ways. You don't have to be, for fathers especially, it's not like you can't show your emotions to the children. You can't be weak in front of them. It's not that you can't hug your child and touch them and hold them and listen to them or look into their eye. It is all very important part of them growing up. So when you include a lot of playfulness into the parenting in daily routine, it definitely avoids, it reduces the scope of shouting match. There is lesser nagging. It definitely reduces your stress level also, and of course attracts the child towards you. Children often want to go to places which is more entertaining and playful for them. So instead of saying that he is very good with his friends but not with us, or he is very nice when he's watching TV but not, when he's spending time, try to find the problem at your level, not at the child's level. Question yourself, why is the child interested or attracted towards the TV and not me? What can I do in my parenting style or my communication style to engage them with me? Now I don't want you to become clowns and all, but it is very important to be a little bit playful. Very strict parenting, over controlling, over intrusive, they don't really give you a very good result. You may succeed in that moment, but when the child turns adult, they have a lot of complexities in their personality. Playful parenting, of course, like I said, it encourages the flow of engagement in learning because the child is interactive in that moment, the child is engaged in that moment. It improves their attitude towards learning. For example, maths, some children may not want to read maths. They don't want to do it because they have a fear of failure. So if you take away that failure by making it a game, by making it fun learning, they will definitely have a better attitude towards learning. Their anxiety will be reduced. It will improve their creativity also because you will encourage them to think out of the box. It builds a lot of problem solving skills, and it instills a lot of self confidence, which is the road towards being independent in life and having a good set of coping skills. Few things to remember before I close. Make sure that you appreciate your child's effort and not just the end result. Even if the child scored good or bad, make sure you always talk about the process. The end is not the important thing, it is the process. When you encourage the process, when you appreciate the process, they would want to do it more. Explore your child's interest. It's very important for you to know rather than just imposing our interest onto children. We have to know what our children have to offer. What do they like to do? Observe them, see them quietly, when they are engaging into things rather than just correcting them immediately. It's okay to have a little bit of things, broken or something, but if it is encouraging a lot of open learning in their mind, I think we should encourage that. It's okay to be silly, like I said, and be dramatic while talking to your child. Be using a lot of storytelling and role playing. Adapt your parenting to fit your child. Do not fit your child to your parenting. That should always be taken care of. Communication is a very important part. Parents who don't have good communication with their children often end up having difficulty with the child growing up. Use play as a strategy because with children, play works. I know your children are adolescents, so play can be in form of, a playful engagement, maybe, taking them out or talking to them. Always talking to your children about what have you studied, what are you doing is not the right thing. You should also talk to them about what interests them, what makes them happy, how was their day, who's their best friend, what do they not like about a particular friend, or what do they not like about a particular parenting style that you have. Encourage them to talk and not run away from you. Be consistent in your approach. Avoid physical punishment completely. It does not solve anything. It can only make your child be scared of you, but the child will never learn that the problem was that behavior and it should not be done. He will learn that it should not be done in front of you. It can be done anywhere else, but not in front of you. Or it can be done in front of people who are younger to them. So spend a lot of quality time with your children. Children don't need your entire day. They only need quality time. You spend 45 minutes with them, but make them feel that they are the center of the world for you right now and nothing else matters. That 45 minutes is going to be extremely enough for you to have a good rapport with your child and the child to be satisfied. You treat your child with the respect. I think that is the last and the most important point. Just because they are younger to us, that does not mean they don't deserve respect. There should be a way we talk to our children. There should be some manners that should be followed at home always. There should be some courtesy. It should not be formal, but it should be a part of life. It should not sound awkward if you say thank you to your child. It should not sound awkward if you say sorry to them. If you have done misunderstood something or shouted on them, just out of a rage. So it's very important that you show respect towards them. They will definitely reciprocate it back to you. With this, I would like to close my talk. I know I've extended it a little bit. If there are any Q&As, I'm more than happy to take it up.
Thank you so much, Akanksha. That was really, really informative. And there are a lot of questions. So I will start right away.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the beginning or near about the beginning of the 10th standard and 12th standard board exams. And one of the constant questions that we have from parents is about anxiety. How do we work with the anxiety surrounding examinations and, of course, COVID and examinations together?
Yeah. Okay. So first thing, I think for the parent, I would want them to know that if your child is anxious, make sure you don't get anxious in return, because that is going to, increase their double up their anxiety, which is definitely not going to lead to any kind of a solution. So first, make sure that you are calm as a parent. You don't lose it. You don't become overwhelmed. Now, second thing that you can do is you need to question or ask your children, as in, what um, is making them anxious. So let them say, let them vent out, because all our emotions need a physical release. Now, the healthy physical release and unhealthy could be crying, shouting, throwing things, or hitting somebody. And healthy way is talking it out, dancing, working out, going for a walk, cycling, all of those things. So talking, I think, is one of the best ways and the easiest way that you can immediately fix a problem. So listen to your children, what is making them anxious. When they are telling you, even if it is the most silly thing which is making them anxious about exam, listen to them and then ask them what can be done, like I said. And if they want a solution out of you, maybe you can tell from your experience that when I was your age, I would also experience the same. So this will help them validate their feeling that yes, it is not a very uncommon experience, and I'm not being weak if I'm experiencing this. But everyone feels that they will be interested to hear out what did you do to fix that. And then when you share it, you then just allow them to take their time to absorb it. And also you can ask them when they're a little bit free and relaxed in their anxiety. Maybe you can ask them, so what do you think we can do to reduce your anxiety? What can we go about it? So fix the problem, identify the problem, and do the problem solving along with the child's engagement. Don't solve the problem, ask the solution out of the child. But you can be a facilitator, you can be a wonderful parent in by having a good communication, looking into their eye, allowing them to feel and say what they want to say. I think that would be one of the very good ways of I see a lot of parents, they are so anxious about the exam, but the child is not. So the child may learn a lot of times from the parents that, oh, it's exam, so I must be anxious. That should not be the case, I believe.
Thank you so much for that input. Another question that does come a lot and has come in a lot from parents as well is, how do I really identify when I am being friendly and when to be stern? Because it's a very thin line. And sometimes you do not want to be in a situation where the child has misunderstood a certain temperament that you portrayed at a point of time.
See, like I said, good behavior, good parenting is important, but intent is always correct. But the point here is that, if the right thing is not said in the right way, it will never give you the right result. So if you feel that, the way you are engaging with the child, if it is not yielding the right result, if your child is displaying certain wrong behaviors, then, like I said, the first thing that a parent must do is identify, can I be the contributor in any way? Am I doing something which the child might be learning from me, or am I encouraging that behavior? So when you question that, you become more aware about your behaviors. You become aware about the way you're talking to the child, the way you are giving into their demands, the way you're responding to their crises and all. So first, when you own up the responsibility, as in how I would be contributing to that, that itself would be a lot of awareness to the parent, as in okay, probably I need to change something. So being friendly and being stern, now these are two very important things. There are certain things, for example, when the child is lying, of course I have to be stern. When the child is displaying a wrong behavior, like hitting somebody or saying wrong things to people, yes, I have to be stern. But stern is always seen as being controlling or being very abusive. No, you have to be stern means I should let my child know that this is not okay, and this will not be appreciated. And then you take a step back, let the child absorb it. We often drag it too much to the point that it loses its essence. So we have to let the child know that what you did today, maybe in front of 10 people, you should never do that. You should always know that, when I should be saying something to the child. If I say it in front of a lot of people, it's going to be an attack to the child. And when you are attacked, you only become defensive. And in defense, you don't learn or display good behavior. It is only run by the survival instinct. So we have to understand that you should communicate in the right manner. If you see a wrong behavior, you should point it out, but at the right time. Take the child to a corner, or maybe at later point of time, let them know what was not okay, why it was not okay, and what you expect. And then leave it to the child. If they don't want to say anything, it's okay. Leave it to the child and let them realize at their own level. If you notice the problem is being solved, good enough. If you feel that it is not being solved, you need to do a follow-up. Okay, now being stern does not mean you have to be rude and arrogant, and being friendly does not mean you have to be agreeing to everything that they say. It is an attitude while talking to the person, right? Friendly and sternness is not a behavior, it is an attitude. So when I'm talking to my child, I must have a friendly tone to it. When I am correcting a particular behavior, I must be firm but friendly. Now that is the kind of balance that the parents must learn.
Thank you so much. One question that has just come in, which is about result orientation. Now, as parents, we constantly tell our children that you need to have the marks in place, and that's very important. Which we also find that in the virtual environment, and when children are appearing for exams virtually, they tend to want to score a little higher, and especially when the parent is not supervising, there is a tendency to try to get inputs, right? And at that point in time, I really want to understand, how is it that we can ensure that the child is not going to adopt a measure like that
So first of
as
all,
they grow up?
I think it's a lot about your own narrative about exam and the exam results. You know, how you portray to the child, what language do you use, what is the statements, how do you frame your sentences. We always have to understand by exams, whenever I'm talking to my child about exam, am I in any way communicating to the child that exam and the results are going to be deciding your worth? Is it something which is equating your worth in life? Is it something which will decide whether you are good or bad, you're a success or you're a failure? The moment we change the narrative to the whole understanding that examination is just a milestone in life, you've been attending classes, you've been doing a particular course, and we need to do a follow up to understand where we are. It doesn't matter whether I'm good or bad, it is only for you to understand where am I. Am I understanding what is being taught? Just making your children pass the classes doesn't matter. It will not help, because they're just, it's very easy to use your rote learning memory and just score well. But does it really bring any kind of, is it serving any purpose? No, because the child is not going to use that information anyway, because it's not going to stay there. You just remembered it. The moment you stop reading about it, you'll forget. So you have to understand that schooling, exams, they are only skill learning. You make the child learn a skill. What skills? By going to the school, it's not just about academic learning, it is about social learning, it is about emotional learning, it is about intellectual development, creative learning, how do you talk to people, communication skill, lot of things. And academic learning happens to be one part of the schooling, right? So it should be treated like one part. It should not become the entire center of the whole, growing years. So examination, I think it's all about the narrative that the parents choose. You don't have to make it look like a monster. Your children should be looking forward to the exam. That's how your narrative should be. If you make it like you have to score well, you have to do good, if you don't do good, you won't get into this college, no one is going to like the concept of exam, because it's a pressure on them. But the moment you tell them, let's just see, how well you have read, let's see, where we are, we'll be able to analyze, what needs to be changed, are you able to learn well, what could be the blocking factor, what could be the obstacles, then the child is going to be a little bit neutral towards the concept of exam. And that's what we need to encourage in children. We have to make them understand that examination is just a milestone. If you don't achieve it once, doesn't mean you're never going to achieve it. Sometimes it can be a little bit delayed, but it's okay. It is okay. It is not going to mean that it is irreversible and you cannot do anything about it. So it's all about the way you frame it, the way you talk to your children about it.
Thank you, Akanksha. There's another question from a parent which says, how do I help my child be more organized? My child is completely disorganized and I need inputs on that. So if you could help us out, please. We can't hear you, Akanksha. You've gone mute.
Somebody unmuted me, but that's okay.
Yes.
So, it's very important to understand it from the child's perspective too, because now Like I said, every child is different. Some children are super organized, even from the very early age. They are very, very organized. If I go back into my childhood, I'll just take an example. My sibling, my brother, he was highly unorganized and I was super organized. But trust me, in the end, it didn't matter. Him being unorganized and me being super organized. It really didn't matter. It did in some or the other ways, but it wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was, what is the outcome of it? If my disorganized way of living is yielding to something negative, then I should be bothered about it. But some children are, they have different way of looking at things. If I feel that my table has to be very well set before I sit to study, then only I can study. It should be taken care of. But if a child is more free in the way they learn, we should encourage the outcome. We should encourage the process. you know Micromanagement doesn't work, but yes, I do understand a little bit of organization is important because it keeps you structured, it keeps you focused. There's a lesser scope of distraction when you're organized because it encourages better planning. So instead of just imposing it to the child, help them understand the concept of organization. How does it help? Just telling them you are not organized and you should be organized, they won't understand why you're saying that. You have to let them know what is the meaning behind it. Quote them a little bit of researches, quote them a little bit of studies which show that it is a trait that is seen in a lot of people who are highly successful. So when you use examples, when you give a lot of stories to them, that's how they learn a behavior. Just telling them because I'm a parent and I know it all doesn't work. So we have to let them know that organization is important because it is important for your brain. One part of the brain, which is, I know not everyone is a medical person here, but at least we can somewhere, it requires a lot of skill to be a parent. You have to do a lot of learning at your own level. If I want to talk to my child, I can always find an easy way and say you have to do because I'm saying. But if I want it to be effective, let me sit and read about it. Why is organization important? I must have some rational, logical point, convincing point in my discussion with the child. It should not just be because I'm saying. So maybe, let your help your child being organized. Maybe you can ask them, how do you want me to help you with it? What does organization mean? If your child is super unorganized, does not don't push them to be highly organized. Ask them for a middle way out. If we can't be super clean in the room, we can at least have our study table clear, at least. So that will be a little bit of a kind of a deal with your child, which is a healthy deal. So you are also adapting to their way and they are adapting to what you are demanding. And when they notice a change because of that behavior change, they will definitely want to do it more then. So let them learn through their experience. You only help them for one thing and then allow them to learn it or encourage that behavior by themselves.
All right. Thank you so much for that input. Two more questions only. One is one of the first things you spoke of today was role modeling and how, as parents, we are our children's primary role models. But in today's day and age, both parents are working, and a lot of times a child is left in the care of another caregiver who is not necessarily the parent. And in that case, there is, of course, an influence of those people as well onto the temperament of the child. How do we handle the challenges that arise as a result of it?
Very much. I think it is a very, very rightly put question. So, like I said, parents happen to be one of the most important role models, not the only role model. Even if they are not left with any caregiver, they can learn a lot from their friends, they can learn a lot from the friends' parents, they can learn a lot from the teachers as well. So, that is the whole thing. You can't be changing people, you can't be correcting the caregiver, you can't be micromanaging everything. But maybe you can make your child, you can spend a lot of quality time with your child understanding the right and wrong, the difference between right and wrong. Instead of fixing up everybody around the environment, why not spend some quality time with the child to encourage them have better learning skills, or to encourage their decision making, the art of filtering, the art of differentiating between what is right and wrong. When you try to fix the problem for them, they will never know how to fix it for themselves. Maybe you can fix up their role models for some till some age, but when they go to the college, when they go ahead in their job, you can't decide what role models they have. So instead of fixing that, we should focus more on spending time with our children in talking about how to differentiate between what is right and wrong, working on their value system. I think parents' job is at the foundation level, which is the most important one. If you work on the foundation, if the foundation is strong, which is your value system, the discipline, the morality, the manners, the courtesy, all of that is what the parents must feed into the child, and then they should set them free. then they should not worry about where my child is going, because they should be confident that my child knows how to deal with it. So if the child is too young, then yes, you must have an active engagement with the caregiver to notice and observe whether they're really displaying a wrong behavior and fix it up. But if the child is growing up, I think you should talk to them about, we are noticing that you are learning this from this person, and then maybe let them know that, how do you learn to filter what is right and what is wrong. So spend and work more on the child than working on the people around them, because that will make the child own up the responsibility and know that, okay, I have to know how to find my way out. I don't have to be a victim of situation.
All right, great. Thank you so much for those inputs.
Mhm.
Last two bits. One is when we spoke of the red flag and
Yeah.
the screen that you had shown us at that point in time, we
Mhm.
did speak of extroversion and
Yeah.
introversion.
Mhm.
Now, what if there is a child whose traditional, typical characteristic behavior is to not be extremely interactive, to
Mhm.
be more of an introvert than, even of an ambivert?
Mhm.
What do we do in those situations, and how do we really identify when we are stepping into an area where there is concern?
Mhm. So first thing that we have to understand, we have to understand the concept of extroversion and introversion. Like I said, it is about how the person copes or deals with a particular situation. For example, extroverts are the ones who are more driven by their feelings and emotions. Introverts are the ones who are more driven by their rational, by their own concept in the head. Until unless their internal world arouses them, they won't be doing a particular thing. They want to do a lot of thinking before doing. And extroverts are the one who are more driven by emotions. So they are more doing than thinking. So of course, when you are more doing, you will be engaging with people, you will be more expressive. Introverts, they will take their time. They can be expressive, but they will take their time. The only difference is they will take their time. There's a lot of misunderstanding about introversion and extroversion. People feel that extroverts are the social ones and introverts are not the social ones. It is completely untrue. Introverts can also be social, extroverts can also be reserved by nature. So being introvert does not mean the child will have the poor social skills. Some children can have poor communication style, but that should not be attributed to being extrovert or introvert. That means there is some barrier which is not allowing the child to, nourish their communication skill. So we must identify the problem. Okay, the problem is in communication style. Then you should identify in what situations my child fails to have a good communication. Is it at home? Is it in school? Is it in a social gathering, social platform, or on a stage? When you identify those areas, you will avoid yourself from generalizing that as a behavior. Oh, my child is socially poor. So that may not be the case. Maybe the child is very expressive and he's with his friends. Or maybe the child is very expressive at school but not at home. Then that leads to other questions. And what about that environment makes my child have poor communication? Is it because of the language barrier? Is it because my child is not good in a particular language, which could be English maybe? Or is it because my child feels threatened in that particular environment? Is it the fear of failure? Is it the fear of negative evaluation? What is it that does not allow my child to open up completely? Then maybe once you identify the problem is when you can fix the problem, right? So it always starts from one point, as in identifying the problem and in what context the problem is happening, rather than immediately thinking it's because of introversion. Or even suppose some child is an introvert and also is reserved by nature. Not every child has to be social. Not every child is meant to be social. Not every child is supposed to be a social speaker and has to be on the stage and attract everyone's attention. Some children are quiet, and how does it matter? I mean, if they are doing good in their life, if they are happy being that way, I think we should be okay with that. Why do we? It says a lot about us that we try to see things in black or white. If you are extrovert, you're talking to people, you're good. If you're not, you're not good. Some children are supposed to be the audience. Some children, maybe they are wonderfully well in something else. Children who are on the stage all the time, maybe they're not good in certain other aspects. So we should not do the balancing like that. The moment we believe that extroversion is good and introversion is bad is where the problem starts. It is absolutely fine if the child is silent. Yes, if the child is silent because they are anxious, because they have anxiety, because they have self-esteem issues, body image issues, or anything of that sort, then it becomes a concern, not because they are introvert or extrovert.
All right. With that, we come to our last question, which is how do I deal with a child who is portraying rebellious behavior?
Again, I think all the problem solving starts with First thing, identifying the problem. Okay, my child is being rebellious. Then I need to understand, is he being rebellious to everybody or just me? Or just the mother or just the father, or is he being rebellious only to the teachers? So first you identify behavior, then you identify in what situation it is happening, and then you identify what about that particular situation. Is the child being rebellious with me only? Then maybe I need to first own the responsibility rather than finding a problem in the child. Problem we have already identified, right? So we need to own up the responsibility. Is it something about my way of communicating which is making my child rebellious? Because children, like I said, they don't learn come with any kind of a learning, they only learn. So if my child is being rebellious, he has learned from somewhere that being rebellious gets your work done, gets your point through, or that's the only way to be. Is he learning that from me? How, maybe me as a parent, am I very dominant, or am I somebody who wants my things my way? Am I somebody who's very inflexible? Am I somebody who's very rude or arrogant to people? Is that my way of talking or dealing with people? Maybe not to the child, but talking to people who I know. Maybe my way of talking to my partner, my way of talking to my colleagues. If my child is observing that, he is also going to learn that, because it makes him feel that this gives you power, this gives you a position, this is how you can get your things done the way you do want. So maybe first you always try to find out, is there any ways I can be doing, I may be the reason. Now how do you know? Because we can't see our internal world, we don't know what behavior we show. Maybe you can ask it to your partner, because your partner is the only person who knows you in and out. So maybe you can ask your partner. Maybe you can also take feedback from very close friends or confidants, maybe one or two friends, where you don't have that barrier. You can ask them, is there any kind of bad attitude or wrong traits that you see in me? Allow them to give a feedback. Now the most important thing here is, don't get upset when they give a feedback, because I'm asking for a feedback. So if they say that yes, probably we have been noticing, but we have been scared of telling you, take it as a positive feedback, and then try to bring that change in you. If people say no, there's nothing wrong and you are the most humble person, then maybe we need to understand, is there something else? Where is my child learning? Always remember the concept, whatever my child is displaying, he's learning from somewhere. So if not me, then maybe what is the other context? Is his friends the reason? Then let me just go out some days and just, from a distance, observe the way he talks to his friends and the friends talk to him. Is he being bullied? Is he being taught all of these ways of talking? Are, a lot of times children are being, influenced. Children talk a lot amongst themselves, so they influence each other that, if you do this, you get your work done. So maybe the problem is not in the home, but child still does it because it is cool, because everyone is doing it. So when that is the thing, then you don't have to be too worried, because that will be the behavior that can shut off. I think everything comes down to the fact, the kind of equation you have with your child. We all have been through schools, we all have had all kind of friends, but we know our equation with our parents. End of the day, we know how you have to be with your parent, and that is decided by what kind of equation you have with your parents. If my parents have had a wonderful equation with me, none of the behaviors is going to derail me. If my equation with my parent is compromised, then my child will be influenced by anything or everything around them. So everything comes down to what kind of a rapport you have with your child, what kind of a equation you share with your child, what narrative you have, what language you use, how you deal with them, how do you respond to them. All of that, I think, makes a lot of impact onto how your child is going to develop.
Excellent, ma'am. I think you summarized it absolutely beautifully. As parents, we are our children's role models, and
Yes.
we need to be the people we wish for them to grow up to be. And I think if we portray that, we're pretty sorted that way. The last point here, where a parent is speaking of how we need to constantly make positive comments and not make negative remarks. If you could please reiterate this once again for us, that will be great. And we'll close with that.
So I think your comments, your remarks have to be situation specific. It should not be a forced behavior that I have to do it for sure. It shouldn't be showered just like that. Of course, I'm not saying that your child has to always earn it, but yes, in a way earn it, because you don't give them gifts and rewards every day. You give them only when there's a right reason for it. So whenever you are giving a good positive remark, make sure there is a reason for it. So now sometimes the reason may not be too big, so your comments or your praises may not be that intense. So it is a very variable thing. It's not a stable thing that every time it has to be the same. So maybe you don't have to do it every time, but every time the child shows a behavior for 2-3 days consequently, then maybe you can just appreciate that behavior. Or whenever you see any small behavior the child is doing good. Not every time it has to be a verbal praise. It can be a smile. It can be a pat on the back. It can be, just looking into the eye and, high-fiving, or any non-verbal behavior can also be a way of showing your positivity towards your child, encouraging a particular behavior. And sometimes it can definitely, you can, while you are having your dinner or when you are all sitting together, make sure your child should not feel that whenever my dad is calling, it is always about a problem. They should always know that if he's calling, it could be because of a praise also. So when you're spending your family time, your child time, pet time with your child, talk about multiple things. You can also talk about, some days you can just call up the child and say, hey, I noticed this behavior and I'm so impressed, just out of the blue also, right? But definitely it has to be sometimes situation specific, but it doesn't have to be always to be done. It should not become a pressure onto the parent. It should not become a feeling that I have to do it because I have to impress my child. You don't have to do it to impress them. You have to only do it to encourage the right behavior. When you appreciate something, of course, it is going to be repeated. When you don't appreciate something, they will know that, it is not giving me the right attention and praise. Let me just drop it off. So it can be in multiple ways, verbal, non-verbal, anyways.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am. The session's been extremely, extremely informative and very, very enriching for each one of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful for me too. Looking forward to more engagements. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, ma'am.
So are we good to go?
Preeti, ma'am? I think Preeti, ma'am.
So, good evening again, and thank you for a very, very wonderful session. And each one of us have had our experiences, and I think it's always very, very important to have a middle path. And I think you have highlighted that so beautifully. There's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. We need to go with our gut. We need to, as parents, reflect and see. And I'm sure it has given a lot of opportunity for our parents to now sit back and reflect and open the gates for communication where they have been blocked. With the forthcoming exams and some of the students just stepping into their board years, I think it's just the right time to change the direction, and just adjust your sails. Everything is fine, and we'll all sail through this beautifully. Thank you, Akanksha, once again. Have a wonderful evening, and wonderful evening to everybody. And I look forward to Akanksha, you joining us for many more sessions coming forth in the next month. Thank you.
Surely. Thank you. It was a pleasure for me too. And thank you so much for, such a wonderful interactive session. It was. Thank you.